All right, this one, this is where I really wanted you to practice, and you did great, guys. All of you. This hit with a baseball on the neighborhood baseball field when playing baseball with friends. This patient sustained a 2 to 3 centimeters superficial laceration to the right cheek. He also sustained a nasal fracture, and that required stabilization in the emergency room. And that laceration up here of the right cheek also required a simple suture. All right, so let's get off of that page showing our codes here. And let's walk through this one. We've got a lot going on here. The first thing we have going on that we're going to identify is our laceration of our cheek. We're going to have to code our diagnosis first. So our diagnosis includes the laceration, the nasal fracture, and our external cause codes. And in the emergency department, those external cause codes are used more often than not because it's a way to report how the incidents, injuries, accidents, so forth occurred. So it's gathering statistical data. All right. So let's code our laceration. We know in ICD-10, more often than not, we pull up exactly not the body part, but the injury itself or the disease itself or the condition. So we're going to pull up laceration. And we're going to scroll down. And we're looking for cheek. All right, so we have cheek. And we're going to open it up. So I have 3 options here. I have a laceration because I don't have a foreign body. There was no indication that anything got into that laceration through the ball hitting the child or the young person's face. So I have without foreign body of the right cheek and temporomandibular area, left, and unspecified. So this was definitely my right, so I'm going to open this one up. All right, so we know that now we have our 7th character codes to identify which encounter, whether it was initial, subsequent, or a sequela. This was an initial. This was a recent current accident. So S01.411A identifies the laceration without a foreign body of the cheek, and that's the right cheek. And then we would scroll down and look at all of our notes. We don't have any notes in here that's going to be applicable to this specific code, but still we're in a learning curve, so we're learning. And I will tell you that even with me, as long as I've been coding, I still, and I use a code book a lot, but using Find a Code or my code book, whichever one I'm in, I'm scrolling down and looking because we forget things. It's easy to forget. So as a refresher, it's always good to look. All right, so S01.411A, we want to jot that down as our laceration. We're going to go back and we're going to code our nasal fracture. All right, just like we coded laceration, we know that we have a fracture, so we're able to code our fracture. It sends us to traumatic by sight, and this was definitely a traumatic fracture. All right, so we're going to scroll until we see nose or nasal. because we want to identify. And the more you get familiar with what's in your index, you know how that it's listing out body parts. So you're scrolling until you get to the nose. All right, right here. So I'm going to open that up. And it's pretty cut and dry. It's going to give me my options. All right, it's not an open. It's not delayed. It's not subsequent with delayed healing. Routine healing was the first one. I'm sorry, I misquoted that. We know we have a fracture of the nose. It's an initial encounter. So we're going to click on that. This is our complete code. Remember, it has to be 7 characters. It provided that in the index. We did not have an intracranial injury. It gave us the same thing over there on our sheet. All right, so our nasal fracture is S02.2XXA. Remember, even though you're finding your complete 7-character code in your index, you still have to go to the tabular. And you will forever be told to do that. That's not something that we stop as we get more, just lost the word, more experience under our belt. It doesn't matter. You always go to the tabular. All right, here we're going to go with our external cause codes and pick up all these that we need to capture. There is its own section in Find a Code, in a code book, whatever you're looking in. External cause codes are separately identified. All right, so the first thing we have here is we want to identify the status. All right, so if I do status, and these are things to make note of, because external cause codes, you want to be able to assign as many cause codes as are available. If they're not available in your documentation, then you're not going to report it. But we do have a status. All right, so if I want to come here, and I know that this person was playing baseball in a neighborhood field, and I'm really right here, I'm going to go, this code I intended to code later, but I'm going to go ahead and code it since I'm here. It's a leisure activity. All right, it's if we open this up, I'm sorry, we did open it up. If we scroll down, and we can't say that it's a volunteer because he didn't volunteer. That's more of if you volunteer for an organization, or if you're a volunteer, perhaps it's a club, then perhaps you could use the Y99.2, but he didn't. He's just doing it for fun. So it's a recreation. Other external cause codes, if we go to this Y99.8, we can see the definitions here. It's a leisure activity. And our scenario states that he was in the neighborhood baseball field playing baseball with his friends. That's definitely a leisure activity. So our Y99.8 identifies our status of external cause codes. You don't always have this in your documentation, but this scenario did provide all that. All right, so I'm going to go back to this external cause. And I want to identify that this person was hit with a baseball. I'm going to use the word struck because I want you to see this word. I want you to write it down. It's commonly what you're going to look at when someone's hit with something they're struck by. So this person was struck by a baseball. Right, so struck accidentally. I scroll down and I see ball. If I open that up, I specifically have baseball, W21.03. I'm going to keep scrolling down because once again, it's going to provide all 7 characters. And I know this is an initial encounter. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And it is struck by a baseball. It's definitely want to jot down and report so that we can identify this patient was struck by a baseball. So far we have W21.03XA and we have Y99.8 as our external cause codes. All right. The other area that we can identify, because it's available, is our location. You know, where did this happen? And we learned in ICD-10, the location, the term used is place of occurrence. Okay, so we're going to pull this up. And we're going to scroll down and we see baseball field, 192.320. When I pull this up, I see that the baseball field is the place of occurrence for our external cause code. Now in ICD-10 and what we learned in application of external cause codes, we know that we can also look for an activity code. So I'm going to click on, these are terms that we learned when we were assigning external cause codes in ICD-10. So the activity here is baseball. I think baseball, yep. Y93.64. All right, so let's go over these so that we understand. And I'm going to go over them in the way I have them here. We want to identify the external cause code as to far as what happened. This patient was struck, hit by a baseball. That code is W21.03XA. We want to identify the place of occurrence. That was your baseball field. Y92.320. What activity was he involved in? Y93.64 identifies baseball. The next ICD-10 coding guideline tells us to code the status of the external cause. This was a leisure activity, Y99.8. Now, to be able to remind yourself what to look for with external cause codes is to go back to the guidelines. If you can't find this specific outline, send me an email. Let me send you the information of what to look for. Remember, if we didn't know that he was playing baseball, we wouldn't code it. You don't have to come in here and do unspecified. Your facility or your physician, whoever you work for, usually tells you if they want those unspecified codes. But with this scenario, we were able to capture all of our external cause codes. And I will say that y'all did a very good job on that. All right, we still have to code what happened with the repairs. So we want to come back up here and we've got to report. We've got to report the nasal fracture that was stabilized, right? So I want to click in here. Back to my CPT index. And whoops. All right, so my body part. Remember, a lot of times in CPT, your body part is your dominant main term. So I have a nasal fracture. And I'm going to open that up. And then I have all these ranges. I have 2 ranges. So we're just going to click on the 21310. All right, this code has been deleted, and I suppose that their IT department hasn't quite got it out of the system yet. So bypass it. Go to the next one. And when I get to 21315, I'm going to open my book view, because this is without stabilization. And my note, if I go back to my procedure note, he stabilized the fracture with a splint and tape. So I know there was stabilization. I'm going to open my book view. I have 2 options under closed. I know it wasn't open. There was no incision made. So I know I'm in a closed treatment of a nasal fracture. This is the one I just looked at. That's not correct because there was stabilization. 21320 identifies the closed treatment of nasal bone fracture with manipulation with stabilization. Okay. And I would continue to scroll down. So 213.20 is going to identify and report what the procedure that the physician did to stabilize the fractured nose. Okay. All right, so now we've got one more procedure that was performed, and that was the suture of the laceration. All right. I know in CPT that main terms I can use repair. If you've looked in CPT, you know that repair is an option. And we're going to go to repair, and we're going to click on that. When we go to repair, let me get that off my screen. And I'm just going to look for cheek, and I'm not going to find it. But what do I know about this from my education and what I've learned as a coder? That this is the skin of the cheek. It was a simple suture. There was no bone. There was no intermediate layers affected. This is a simple suture. That means it's the skin, because the skin is what covers our cheek. So we can know that by our own just personal understanding. And so we have a wound. Now, for those of you that remember, we did not have all 3 of these options before, and we do now. This is the ticket that I told most of you that I submitted to get all 3 of these listed. So we now have our options of complex, intermediate, and simple. And the documentation supports simple sutures of the skin. So I'm under a wound, I'm under my skin, repairing my skin. I have a wound, I have a laceration, and I'm in the simple 12001 to 12018. So I've got to click on the code category. All right, And I can glance at this and see that this is not my cheek. But it gave me a category. So I'm going to open up my book. And I'm going to scroll down. And I'm going to find my face, my cheek. And it's right here. It's a simple repair. It's a superficial wound. And it's of my face. It's of my cheek. My cheek is on my face. And I don't have a definite measurement in this scenario, but I know that it's documented as 2 to 3. So I'm going to go with the 12013. If I click on that, I clearly see this is a simple repair of the wound on the patient's face, 2.6 centimeters to 5.0. So my two procedures are 21320 and 12013. And I've got to have a modifier for this procedure because these are two codes that are typically not assigned together. The laceration of my cheek and the fracture of my nose are not in the same category. They're totally different. So my modifier is going to be 59, not 51. And I would assign it to 12013. It's the lesser of these two as far as intense procedures and payment.
Hello.
Hi, Eugenia.
Okay,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
how about the radiology?
Okay, yeah, I saw that. Let's go back. We did not
Okay.
code that. And I probably should have put it in there, don't. But let's go back and look at what was assigned here. Because that is, had I coded it, and that was great that I don't know how many of you coded it, but there was a few that coded it. This is correct, 70140. Now, that is, I want you to remember that when you're working in an emergency department, this code is not going to be assigned when you're coding for that department because that radiology exam is in your charge master.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But as a coder and learning, yes, you are correct. And the other ones that assign that code, you are correct. 70140 is a radiological exam of the facial bones. And we don't know how many views. All we know is that there was an x-ray done because it said the x-rays revealed a nasal fracture. Thank you, Eugenia.
Thank you.
And I'm
very
sorry,
much.
I meant to write that in my notes here for mentioning, and I failed to write that down. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. All right, Blessing, you had a question on which chart with the principal diagnosis?
The last charts.
The last
one
chart.
with the nasal fracture and the laceration. Yes.
Yes. The hold on, let me get back to it. Where's it at? All right, here's our codes. Honestly, the nasal fracture would be listed as your primary because it's more extensive. And it's going to match your 21320 as well on your bill. These are all the codes, the nasal fracture, the external cause codes. I've listed all of them on this one. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I would put this as the primary. And as a matter of fact,
So
I'll go ahead. And I'm going to add those.
and I have another question.
Okay.
Right, so there are some charts that the diagnoses are are written with unspecified, that we have to code them with unspecified. Like, is it right to always put an unspecified code while working, or such instance we should query the physician?
Most of the time, you're going to use that unspecified code in the outpatient field. Can you give me an example?
Okay, maybe
I
like
know it's hard.
the nasal fracture, maybe to the maybe the left part of the nose, or maybe during the laterality, and it wasn't included. So
Right.
at that point, we just pause and query, or we should go ahead with coding the unspecified part of the face. Or
All right, good question. You're going to look at your x-ray. Is it the left or the right? So you can code from your x-ray. And when you're actually working, which is what you're talking about, you're going to have that documentation in your chart. You should have
Okay.
the radiology report, because we can code from that. We can code the laterality. And you're right, it wasn't here. This is all that we had. These are actually taken and tweaked and everything else from educational material that I've received from different places. So we don't always have everything. So those questions are good. Thank you, Blessing.